Hey, this is Chris, and in this video I'm going to be talking about what the biggest worries are for investors at the moment and what it means for your portfolio. Now, fear is not a new concept in markets. In fact, at any point in time, people who are investing are worried about something. Over the last few years, people have been worried about trade wars, they've been worried about overvalued tech stocks, they've been worried about COVID, they've been worried about inflation and a whole range of other things. In fact, these worries are distilled pretty well in a survey that Merrill Lynch does once a month, where it actually asks fund managers, what is your biggest worry at the moment? What is the biggest risk in markets? Now, this is a fascinating study, not because it helps you identify potential future risks, but it actually helps you see what fund managers are already worried about, and therefore is probably risks that are already embodied in prices. Because the thing about risk is if everyone is already worried about something, it probably isn't a risk you need to be concerned about because it's probably already embodied in the price of investments. A great example is in this Merrill Lynch survey. COVID has been the biggest risk people have been concerned about in the fund manager community since March 2020. Now, this wasn't a concern that they had in December 2019 or even January 2020. This was a concern they had after the market had already fallen and after COVID and its impact on markets had already been well understood by market participants. And in fact, if you had invested based on this worry, or in fact taken your money out of markets based on this worry in March 2020, it would have been an awful decision because you would have missed out on all of the fantastic market returns for the rest of 2020. Now, the market concern that most active fund managers have has recently flipped from being COVID to inflation. Inflation because of all of the stimulus that's been injected into markets by central banks and by governments to support economies after COVID. Fund managers are now concerned that this will have the potential impact of future inflation and that this could have a detrimental effect on bond prices and bond markets. Now, this is really interesting information because over the last month, this has become the biggest fear. Now, 37% of participants in this survey cite inflation in bond markets as the biggest risk. Now, as an investor, what does it mean for your portfolio? Well, what it means is probably at least over the short run, you can rest easy around this particular risk because it's a risk that everyone's already aware of and everyone is already concerned about. Does it mean that it's something you shouldn't worry about in the medium or long term? No, but it probably won't be when everyone is worrying about it that markets will actually take notice and the real risk will come into effect. So if you've been reading a lot about inflation and the potential impacts this will have on markets, reading about the fall in bond prices, reading about the impact this has had on tech stocks, the chances are that the real risk isn't going to play out now. If there is a risk, it's going to play out way into the future when no one is thinking about it. And what can you learn about investing generally from this risk survey? Well, it is that the market is always worried about something, fund managers are always worried about something, but they're usually worried too late or too early. So worrying about what everyone else is worrying about is the last thing you need to be doing as an investor. Just stick with your strategy, stay invested, and don't worry about other people's worries.